Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Muriel Bowser. I'm the mayor of Washington, D.C., and we are located at the district's Homeland Security and Emergency Management Agency. I've just concluded a meeting with our incident management team related to the Potomac interceptor incident affecting D.C. Water. And when I say that, I mean DC Water and Sewer Agency. I am joined by leadership from DC Water, CEO and General Manager David Gaddis, as well as the Chief Operating Officer Matt Brown, including members of my team, the City Administrator for the District, Deputy Mayor for Public Safety and Justice, as well as HCMA Director, Department of the Environment Director, and the DC Department of Health Director. So our goal today is to make sure that everybody has a good understanding of the repair that is underway on the Potomac Interceptor, some background about the Potomac Interceptor, and the impacts that we anticipate. So I am going to pass it off to DC Water, and there will be a lot of probably concepts or even places in our presentation that people aren't that familiar with. So at some points I'm going to ask people just to define or explain to make sure there's a clear understanding of what we're saying. And one of those concepts is this: drinking water is separate from the sewer system. So our drinking water is not impacted by this incident, and we're going to say that a couple of times during this presentation and give you some background information as to why. So with that, I asked General Manager Gaddis to go over some background information and to talk about where we are.
Thank you very much, Mayor, and good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for attending.
Might want to get a little bit closer to the mic.
And thank you for attending this situational update. I want to thank Mayor Bowser for organizing this session to ensure we are all aligned and coordinated on our efforts regarding the Potomac Interceptor. I'll keep my comments brief and focused on three essential points that we are prioritizing in our statement, releases, and interviews. First, DC Water continues to divert all wastewater from the interceptor away from the Potomac and using bypass pumping and route to flow around damaged sections. No wastewater, again, no wastewater has spilled into the Potomac since February the 8th. Second, we want to reiterate that the district's drinking water is in no way impacted by the collapse. It is a completely different and separate system here in Washington, D.C., and the Washington Aqueduct intake is upstream of the collapse pipe and the collapse site. Finally, we continue to conduct daily water sampling at numerous sites along the Potomac and the Anacostia, and we are recording steadily decreasing levels of contamination. With those key points shared with you, I would like to turn it over to our COO, Matt Brown, to talk about some of the items that we have on our slide. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Matt?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Gaddis. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Potomac Interceptor, our response, and where we're going from here. So the first thing, the mayor said that we're going to explain some concepts. So let me tell you a little about the Potomac Interceptor. It's a 54-mile intercepting sewer that brings flow in to the District of Columbia to be treated at the Blue Plains Wastewater Treatment Plant from as far away as Dulles Airport. It was constructed in the early 60s. It was authorized by the U.S. Congress and serves a very large area, over 500,000 people, in Fairfax and Loudoun counties, the town of Vienna, Herndon, I mentioned Dulles Airport, and Montgomery County, Maryland. As the mayor said, and as Mr. Gaddis said, the drinking water system is completely separate from this sewer system. And in fact, you can see on the map the location of the water intake, which is north or upstream of the break location that you see in red. There is a separate water intake at Little Falls downstream. That was closed at the beginning of the event and remains closed. And so the aqueduct is only drawing from that upriver source. Next slide, a little bit more about the Potomac Interceptor, including some pictures of its construction in the 60s. I'll go through those first. The two methods that were used to construct the Potomac Interceptor were what is called cut and cover. So you see that on the left with the gentleman standing in the pipe. The earth is removed, the pipe is laid, and then it's covered back up. There are also sections that were tunneled through rock, and that is the section on the right. We have found that in some cases, some of the fill that went back on top of the cut and cover section appears to be what came out of the tunneling operation, and that is one of the items that has been causes some issues as we work to clear the Potomac Interceptor. It ranges in diameter from 30 to 96 inches. The section that broke was a 72-inch section, and again, this conveys water all the way down to the world's largest advanced wastewater treatment plant at Blue Plains. This is a section of pipe that we inspect our sewers regularly. This is a section of pipe that was targeted for rehabilitation. A procurement is underway, and we were not able to get to it before the break occurred.
Mr. Gaddis, did you want to address inspections?
Yes, if I could, real quick. Thank you very much, Mayor, for reminding me of that. I just wanted to remind everyone that as of 2/17 this week, we have received some updated information at DC Water, and we've located an additional 2024 report that talks about the condition assessment for the pipe in the system at this time, and that report is of the PI, and we are just really on top of reviewing all of those reports. This assessment with our consultants, our contractors, and our internal investigation remains ongoing, and we will continue to share updates with you as we gather that update. And we're looking at all segments of the Potomac Interceptor and looking at some of the things we've looked at in the past, some of the views we've gotten in the past, and we're getting new views as well today. Thank you.
Thank you. Timeline?
Yeah, let me turn to the timeline. Obviously, we take this situation seriously, and the first thing that we worked to do was to contain the wastewater and limit the flow to surface water. So we became aware of the incident on January 19th, Martin Luther King Jr. Day. We have an odor control facility that is near the site of the break. We had a camera that detected movement. Upon investigation, we found that there was indeed a break, indications of a break with wastewater coming out of the ground. This was late in the day under the clear of the daylight the next day on January 20th. We had crews on the site on January 19th, had additional people on the 20th to assess the situation, and immediately worked to put a plan in place. This required extensive coordination, working with the National Park Service, working to bring bypass pumping, very large pumps, in order to move the wastewater around the break site and back into the Potomac Interceptor. We thought that this operation was going to take a week. We got it done in 5 days. And so that is a testament to the men and women of DC Water, as well as our contracting partners who helped us design and then implement the solution on January 24th. And so at the time, on January 24th, we had 40 million gallons a day of pumping capacity, 6 bypass pumps. You may remember there was a bitter cold period that started between the 25th and the 26th. During that time, we did face some complexities with the pumps because of ragging. Wipes entered those pumps, caused them to clog up. They had to be taken out of service, and that decreased our pumping capacity. So there were limited overflows during that time, but we were able to significantly have an impact on the wastewater flows entering the Potomac River on January 24th. With the addition of additional pumps, we brought our pumping capacity to 60 million gallons a day on January 27th, and that further reduced the flows going into the Potomac River. Then we began on January 28th excavation of the site. As I alluded to earlier, one of the complications of the operation is that as we excavated, we found a large rock dam. And again, what appears to have happened is the rocks were used as fill, and when the pipe collapsed, those rocks fell into the pipe and nearly cut off all of the flow in the pipe. So we turned in order to, the next thing we needed to do was completely dry out that pipe. And so in order to do that, we constructed an additional pit upstream and moved, there's 130 million gallons a day of pumping capacity there now. I'm pleased to report that the excavations began yesterday. We have men and women down in the pipe in order to move the muck out of the pipe. So the clearing operation is underway, and we're very pleased with how that's proceeding. This has been a situation where we have involved concurrent activities, and so the very first priority was to move the flow back into the Potomac Interceptor. We knew from early on that there would be environmental restoration underway, and so we began planning for that early in the process. The other thing that we started doing, and I'll talk about this in just a second, is we began water quality testing on January 29th. Water is life, water is important to DC Water, and we thought it was important to begin that testing in order to provide results to the public.
So Matt, if we could just pause a bit on the arrows that you see below.
Sure.
And it's hard to contextualize what those numbers mean, or that we could compare it to in our daily lives. But between the point of the failure of the pipe and the 24th, you can see the large amount of wastewater escaped during that period of time.
That's correct, ma'am.
When the intervention was made, and then correct me if I'm misunderstanding, from the 24th to the 28th, by the 24th, most of the wastewater was diverted.
That's correct.
Between the 24th and the 28th, because of some interruptions that you just described, there was some wastewater emitted.
That's correct.
But after the 28th, there have been relatively small amounts of wastewater emitted. And since the 9th, we haven't had any overflows.
That's correct.
Okay, I understand. Thanks.
Sure. This is a diagram of the operation. I think it may help explain how we are moving the wastewater so that it is controlled. It's a controlled way into the canal, and that way that it doesn't reach the Potomac River. So I'll start with the red X in the middle. That is where the failure occurred. That's near our odor control facility, and that is what led to the wastewater entering the Potomac River. So the way to avoid the wastewater going into the Potomac River was to build a bypass. And fortunately, the C&O Canal is in that area, and I mentioned earlier how we worked with the National Park Service. They've been very great to work with in order to establish the bypass route through the canal and then back into the Potomac Interceptor. So the top line is the Potomac Interceptor, and we've marked some of the manholes there. What we did was we installed these giant pumps that move the water through HDPE pipes over land and into the C&O Canal. The C&O, it flows down by gravity, and then we constructed 3 dams downstream, and the flow is conveyed back into the Potomac Interceptor and then down to Blue Plains to be treated. This is the specific location in relation to the District of Columbia. It was a 72-inch section of the pipe that broke. It was made of reinforced concrete pipe. It's a reinforced concrete pipe, and that location is about 4.5 miles from the district boundary. I mentioned that testing was important to us, and so beginning on the 29th, we began water quality testing at 6 locations, at a location upstream at Old Anglers Inn, at the site where the flow entered the Potomac River, and then at 4 locations in the District of Columbia. And we've posted these results daily in order to be transparent. You'll notice in red there are very high readings near the drainage channel, and there will continue to be high readings there until we can do the environmental remediation in that area. But if you can see in all of the other locations, and I know that the district is going to talk about test results in a bit, but you can see that the results both above and then below have been within normals that we normally see or can normally see in the District of Columbia. There is a limit of 410 where swimming is not recommended because of the E. coli levels, and the results that are in green are those that are below 410. Just a little bit about the historic C&O Canal. The C&O Canal was completed in 1850 and was a shipping lane. And so goods were transported on the C&O Canal, and there's a towpath adjacent to the C&O Canal. The C&O Canal was dry in that location. It is lined with clay, which means that it can hold the wastewater and move it down to the location where it can be conveyed back into the Potomac interceptor. The distance that the wastewater is conveyed in the canal is about half a mile. And after this incident is over, we'll begin that environmental remediation effort that I talked about earlier. There's 3 main locations where we will be doing environmental remediation. We want to make sure that that plan is ready to go as soon as the flow is returned to the canal. The 3 locations are obviously the canal that's being used to convey the wastewater. The second is the drainage channel, which brought the flow to the Potomac River. And then the third is the shoreline of the river where the overflow entered the river. And so we're coordinating with National Park Service and the Maryland Department of Environment on that. And it is the canal, just to be very clear. The canal is how we're keeping the sewage out of the river. We hope that members of the public, anyone who would like to learn more, will join us at our DC Water headquarters on Wednesday, February 7th at 7 p.m. so that we can have a conversation about the incident and how we addressed it and how we will move forward. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you, DC Water. And now we're going to hear from the District's Department of the Environment as well as DC Health. And we're going to just walk through how our agencies are responding. I already talked about our incident management team that brings all of the emergency management planning capability here at DCH-SEMA and all of our agencies that support a particular incident. So we're working that. But now let me turn to Richard Jackson from the Department of Energy and the Environment to talk about water testing and what's available publicly.
Yes, ma'am. So for DOE, we've started conducting weekly testing of the river in conjunction with the testing that DC Water has already done. We're moving toward a daily schedule, which will occur as we transition from DC Water to us. We've worked with EPA to allow us to have access to their laboratories in Fort Meade that will allow us to, again, ramp up our testing abilities. Those testing results will be posted, and we will also be conducting inspections of the site on a daily or weekly basis. Actually was there yesterday.
Okay, if we could advance the slide, and Richard, could you just,
Sure.
because we're going to be talking about what you're finding and what we can see in terms of these numbers in the district.
Yes, ma'am. So what this slide shows is kind of giving a little context, a little history of sampling in the river. So in 2011, these are 2011 results that you see before you at Fletcher's Cove, Key Bridge, 14th Street Bridge. Those were typical results that we've seen in 2011. As we move into 2012 as a comparison, as you can see, those numbers also fluctuated but stayed in that range of abilities. In 2011, there was some slightly higher levels at Pennsylvania Bridge and South Capitol, but again, going to 2025, still comparable. So that's just kind of giving you a history of the data that we've collected over the years and how that data is reflected using those same 6 points that we've always used. And again, those numbers all fall within, the majority fall under the 410 recreational standard. And so that just gives you a little bit of history of what has occurred in the river to date.
And I think the next slide shows what.
So
what we're
this slide
focused
shows here is the current data we've collected since February 9th, 2026. So as you can see, the same sampling points as the previous year show, and these are our current results at those same points in this year's data, like 2 weeks ago. So still, slightly elevated as we see, but well within the 410 range, or excuse me, below the 410 recreational limit. And what you see beside that is the map showing DC Water sampling points in blue, and then in red or purple, burgundy, those are the sampling points that DOE are sampling at currently. As we transition over, we would also be covering all those points, would still be covered as we transition to weekly testing.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
And we talked a little bit about this already in terms of what the federal declaration request includes, and I won't spend a lot of time on that. CA, do you want to hit some high points?
I'll just hit some high points. Bolded at the top is the ability to be able to get reimbursement for the costs incurred both by the district and DC Water, as a very practical and real benefit from having declared the emergency and requested help. And then I just identify highlight a few of the bullets on this lower half of the slide here. First of all, the value of FEMA doing interagency coordination calls, so we make sure that we make use of both technical assistance and resources that the federal government has. We already are, DOEE is working with EPA with some of their water testing labs to be able to allow for us to do testing more frequently. Federal help and technical assistance, what DC Water is undergoing is both complex and additional technical eyes on it to be able to assess and identify ways to be able to expedite the repair and full repair of the break site is beneficial. Asking the Army Corps of Engineers to conduct and share a comprehensive assessment of the intake sites and treatment plants to be able to assess for water quality protection and treatment capacity. And then finally, recognizing that there are some small business consequences from this downstream as a result of, particularly as we get to a prolonged period of lower activity on the waterways, being able to make sure businesses affected by this have an opportunity to be able to get aid and financial benefits from that. And then the only highlight on the right-hand side is just identifying the need for long-term remediation and capital improvement that we both will do as a region with DC Water and look for federal assistance support to be able to do that.
Okay, and so before you ask, we have not received our approval at this press time, but when we do, we will soon let you know. It should be obvious, but I'll say it anyway. It's not impacting any of the work that we have discussed. Again, drinking water is not impacted, and who wants to walk through why it's not impacted?
I will do that.
Okay, thank you, Doc.
So, hello, I'm Dr. Bennett from the Department of Health. So as you can imagine, my main concern initially was whether our drinking water would be impacted, and so I have learned a lot from DC Water and DOE about why we feel comfortable. Our drinking water system is a separate system. You could see it somewhat on the map. The river is the source of our water, and we do get water come in from the river, but it was upstream of this event. And it enters a system that is separated out from the sewage system. So the sewage water goes to Blue Plains, the drinking water goes to the Washington Aqueduct, and they are not together. So the water used in our drinking water is pulled upstream from the break, and you can see that there was water testing upstream to be sure that there were no impacts in that area, and we did not see any increase in the levels there. And then the wastewater that did go into the river, we can see from the data, did increase levels downstream, so it flowed downstream and our water remained at an intake upstream of that. The intake site that is downstream is the Little Falls, and that is closed during this season of the year generally, and was not open at the time of the break, and will not be opened anytime soon, as is routine. And so we don't have any reason to think there will be contact between this sewage spill and our water intake at any point. And so once pulled from Great Falls, the water goes to the Washington Aqueduct, which the Army Corps of Engineers runs, and then it's cleaned and distributed to DC Water, and then DC Water distributes it to customers in the district. So all of the water we're getting is after the cleaning process, and before it got to the cleaning process, it never was in contact with the sewage. So I feel comfortable telling everybody that we don't have a concern about drinking water in the district. We did do an advisory about contact with the river, and that was really an abundance of caution. So what we're telling people right now is that we really shouldn't be having contact with the river right now, so avoiding contact, and that means personal boating, all of our kayakers and folks who are generally on the river as it gets warmer, fishing and pets and playing or wading in the water. So I'm most concerned, of course, about pets, small children, elderly people, folks with immune problems. So generally, we're asking everybody to not be in contact with river water until we've had some more confidence that it's safe. That recommendation was made based on really an unprecedented event. If you've seen the pictures and from what we know of the data, we had a huge event happen just upstream from us, and it really wasn't clear initially what the dynamics of the river and weather and other things were going to do for how far down that concentrated sewage was going to travel. We have seen from our data that we have had some initially high levels that have really decreased since then. So we will be looking at when we will decrease our guidance. So when will we lift our guidance? We have, at this point, we have had a last overflow on February 9th. You can see in the data at the site that there are increases related to the initial site and then the overflow. Downriver from that, we're looking at every site downriver and seeing pretty stable data. So the last overflow was February 9th, and we've had now getting close to about 3 weeks of continued normal levels downstream that are well within what we normally see in the river before this event happened. And that is what we're looking for. We're looking for, no matter what the weather conditions are, that we stay somewhere in our normal range of what we are used to seeing before this event occurred. We expect that that will, at 21 days, which will be on March 2nd, we will have seen that pattern continue, and then we will lift the advisory. Under district law, just a reminder, we're not supposed to be swimming in either of our rivers already. We are very commonly under the recreational limit, but still it is considered district law that you not swim in the river without some special permit or permission. Most of you do not have that, so please don't swim in the river, even when we lift the advisory. And these are the last 3 points I will go over. Drinking water is not impacted. Of course, that's the number one, and never was. So it's not that it's become safe. It was safe the entirety of this incident. There's no overflow into the Potomac anymore, so what we are seeing now is the clearing of that first incident, and the last overflow on February 9th is getting further distant away. DC Water and DOEE are monitoring for E. coli levels. We're going to publish those weekly, but we're going to be able to start to see daily levels coming soon. And until further notice, which we expect will not be too much longer, we're still asking you to avoid contact with river water on the Potomac side.
Okay, thank you. I know that was a lot. We have listed all the places where you can go for more information, including an in-person meeting that DC Water will host on February 25th. And now I want to turn to Clint to talk about the weekend weather forecast.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'm Clint Osborne, the Director of the DC Homeland Security and Emergency Management Agency, and while we've been monitoring and supporting this event, we've also been keeping track of the tail end of our winter season. We are expecting somewhere between 1 and 3 inches of snow, be a wet, heavy snow on Sunday into Monday. To prepare for that, the district snow team has been going through their normal preparations, and they'll begin a full deployment of assets of the snow team, all of our plows, light trucks, heavy trucks, on Sunday, February 22nd. In addition, the Department of General Services is monitoring the forecast and is ready to begin deploying their snow teams as needed to get out and pre-treat. One thing with the cold temperatures we've had, we've been on message about this, and we want to continue to stay on messages. Our shelters are open, and there's room for everybody who's unhoused or sleeping outside. You can request free, accessible transportation for yourself or someone else if you call the shelter hotline at 202-399-7093 or by dialing 311. So we just want to really remind our unhoused residents and people who interact with unhoused residents that those resources are available, and we really want to see you be safe and inside during these cold and wet conditions.
Okay, that was a lot of information. Thank you for your patience, and we'll be able to take a few questions. Yes.
Hi, thank you, Raphael with WSA9. Mr. Gaddis, you mentioned the report, the additional report. I'm sorry, we just didn't get the context of what the report indicated or how it kind of pertains to the presentation. Like, what will that report add to the context of that pipeline that collapsed?
We're currently reviewing that report. I've asked for the report to be reviewed and for us to continue to get as much information out of that report as we did the report that I referenced for 2021. And so as we get additional information, I will definitely make sure that you, the media, the public, get more information about that report. But one of the things we do know is that report, there was an assessment. There was also an assessment by the engineers as well on the 2024 report, and very similar to what we saw in the 2021 report. But I just wanted to be totally transparent that there was a 24 report.
Just for further clarity, so essentially it would tell you the condition of that pipeline in question during the 2024 period. Is that
It
correct?
would. That is correct.
Mark,
So just more on this, who wrote that report?
Mark, before you continue, can you all turn up the mics a little bit for me? Okay, go, Mark.
Thank you. So, Mr. Gaddis, who wrote that? Was that an internal report? Was that done by an who wrote that 2024 report? And
I don't know who wrote the report in 2024, but I will get you that information.
have you seen the report?
I have not seen the report
Mr.
myself.
Brown, has anybody from DC Water up here seen the report?
I've not seen the report.
Do you have reason to believe that it raised red flags about this section or any other sections of the interceptor that maybe somebody missed?
What we do know is that what we've been told is it is very similar to the 2021 report, but without me looking at it itself, I can't say, Mark.
And then could I follow up on that just on the 2021 report? And you had indicated that you would release that and the NASCO scores. Did any section of the interceptor that had been rated over the past 5 years, you'd indicated that 90% of it had been rated on the NASCO score. Did any sections of the interceptor rate worse than the 3.5 that this section rated in during that time? So
The way, if I could just explain real quick, the way that pipe is rated with the score that you referenced, an 1,800-foot section is what's rated, and then it is the average, and that is the number that I've been giving you on the 3.5 piece. And so as a result, there are different places in the pipe that may have a spike where it's, maybe needs to continue to be looked at or monitored and reviewed. And there are sections in the pipe that do need that in the 2021 report, but I don't know about the 2024 report.
So in the 2020, and I appreciate it, that's very helpful and informative, and I really appreciate that explanation of how to understand those numbers. But so in the 2021 report, were there any of those sections that averaged out to a score more troubling than the 3.5 score that this section averaged out to?
Yes, sir.
So did any of them get rated at a 5?
I don't know if it was at a 5. I do know there were some 4. There was a 4 in there. There may have been a 5. But also what goes with that, Mark, is the engineers then take a look at that. And it's not just the report itself or the rating. We also look at the cover. We look at how it's encapsulated and all those sort of things. And then, as you know, engineers then make a decision as to what they need to do or continue to track and make sure that the break can be contained and those sort of things.
I appreciate my last on this, and I appreciate your patience with this. That 4 that you say that you do recall, was that above the Great Falls intake valves? That section that rated that poorly?
The one that I was referencing was below. I don't know about above. I have not looked at anything yet that showed above, but up below, that is what I was looking at. You're welcome.
Martin?
So just continuing on this theme, you guys as DC Water had talked about that last fall you had completed a rehab on a portion of the pipe just north of where the break happened. Was that portion rated? I'm assuming that portion would have been rated worse than this portion, or was it all part of that 1,800-foot segment you're talking about?
Matt, do you have an answer for that, Matt? I'm sorry.
Sure. I don't have the specific rating, but it was deemed that was deemed as more critical in order to, and so the method there was it was about 800 linear feet of slip lining in order to reinforce that section.
Okay, and just obviously, I think you guys have said this, but if this could be made available to us, I mean, if you can see these reports, I'm assuming they should be public, or if they're not, if they could be, that'd be great. One random question, because I mean, much has been made of the fact that the CNO is there, and it's great that it's there to serve the purpose that it's serving right now. There are portions of the Potomac interceptor that don't run along the CNO. What would happen if one of those portions broke? Like, how do you divert around that?
We're talking about this one right now, Martin. And so if the question is how can we not have aging infrastructure fail, I think part of our discussion with the federal government is exactly that. What role can the federal government play, especially in infrastructure like this? I talked about already, we think the federal government should be supporting Clean Rivers. I mean, the Clean Rivers Project, I'm using a shorthand. And so I think we're going to continue to have that discussion, and like all agencies, and DC Water can discuss this now or later time, what their capital improvements plan looks like, how it's funded, and how it's implemented. Just like we do. And frankly, we have a lot of assets as DC government, and we're always constantly trying to make sure we're investing in them. Okay, yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon, Felicia Ashley, ABC 7. I know we're waiting to find out about the reimbursement, but right now, about how much is this costing the district or expecting to cost?
I'm going to turn to DC Water for that, if we have an assessment about that.
So we, right now, what we've estimated is that the repairs and the remediation is somewhere close to $20 million. There is a IMA agreement, an intermunicipal agreement that we have with the other jurisdictions. That IMA agreement is what will guide us into what the separations are for the other jurisdictions. I don't know what that separation is right now, but it won't just be the District of Columbia.
And then you mentioned that the canal is lined with clay, so once the pipeline is fixed and all of this is handled, will the canal then need to be cleaned out or cleared because of the waste, and how would that work?
Yes, so we have an environmental team that we have contracted with. We will work with them in coming up with what that plan looks like. We will then work with EPA. We will work with Maryland MDE as well, and come and get the plan approved, and then we will start the work, or Maryland will start the work themselves.
Jenny?
Thank you. Jenny Gathray with the Washington Post. So on the capital improvement plan, after this incident, has DC Water moved around or reprioritized any sections of the Potomac Interceptor in response out of concern that the rating, about, you get what I'm asking?
No, great question. Thank you very much for that. What we're doing is we are taking a look at all of our past reports and identifying where we see issues, and that will lead us to a reprioritization, but we have not, at this point in time, reprioritized anything at this point in time, but we are going through that process as we speak.
But you are in procurement for some work, right? Is that what you said, Matt?
That's correct, Mayor. Yes.
Okay.
There's a total of it's about 7,800 linear foot section. So the first thing we're going to do, there's a total of about 10,000 feet around the break site. So the first thing that we're going to start as soon as the emergency repair is done and flow is returned to the Potomac Interceptor, we are going to engage in a longer-term project. It's about 2,700 linear feet, and then beginning this summer, we'll be procuring for the remainder of the project for a total of 10,000.
Sorry, a couple more. And then on the ratepayer side of things, I know that we're still waiting to know if the federal government will kick in funds. So obviously there's some uncertainty there. But if that doesn't happen, would DC Water raise bills for residents to pay for these various capital projects?
At this point in time, I don't see us having a rate increase because of this incident. We have already submitted to our board our rate increases that we're looking forward to in the future in order for us to continue to run the utility and provide clean drinking water and sewer services to the District of Columbia. And so, but this time we don't see where there would be an increase because of this incident.
Last question. It seems like part of the discussion about the river and its water quality is moving forward going to be maybe just as much about public perception as anything else. You know, after this incident, you have people who might be increasingly concerned about the water quality, even though the testing data. So maybe Director Jackson, you know, or Mayor Bowser, how are you going to approach that piece of things to reassure people about the river, given all the publicity, you know, of this massive sewage spill? And what feedback are you already getting there?
Well, I hope that you'll be a part of that process, Jenny, and report the information that we definitely had a massive spill when it was contained, and what's happening in testing data downstream from the incident. And so all we can give people is the facts and report them as timely as we can. And likewise, make adjustments. And part of why we're kind of looking ahead to lift the advisory is because we had an unprecedented event. There are repairs going on. There's weather events happening. So if the doc comes to me and says, well, you know, we thought March 2nd, but maybe it's going to be a little bit later, then that's what it'll be. But we will give the information, we'll evaluate it and report to the public as we need it. Yes.
If I could go back to the cost, the $20 million cost, and kind of tie that together with the request for federal aid. At the last briefing, DC Water, you guys had told us that you believed as the Maryland and Virginia would bear the brunt of, or at least 55% of the cost, because that's kind of how that IMA breaks down, and you're shaking your head in an affirmative there. But I'm wondering if the president were to grant the emergency declaration and the request that Mayor Bowser has put forth, we've seen her request kind of listed as the District of Columbia and DC Water getting assistance. The president has put out on social media, now Maryland and Virginia need to ask for their own help. What I'm kind of trying to get at is, if the cost is $20 million and then the president grants the mayor's request for funding, would that kind of cover just DC's portion of what is owed, or would that cover all the regions?
So let me take a stab at what you're asking, Mark, because DC Water can't make their own request, okay? And I'm making it on their behalf, and we'll pass through those costs, and we expect 100% reimbursement. So I mean, that's why I agreed to do it. In terms of what the breakdowns are, I think if the president wants to help Americans who deserve to know that the Potomac River is safe, it doesn't matter, in my estimation, if it comes through DC to DC Water, because DC Water serves DC, Maryland, and Virginia. It's kind of hard to parse it out. And if things upriver aren't taken care of well, it does impact the perception of the mighty Potomac. And so for us, it has to be taken care of upriver, downriver, at the site, in DC. It all has to be taken care of. And we're happy to be the conduit for the region. Just as DC Water, you saw, did you see the description of what that Potomac Interceptor, who it's for? It's for the region, because all of the flow is coming down and going over to the aqueduct. But it serves a lot of people in this region. Yes. Okay, go ahead.
Beatrice Peterson, ABC News. So I noticed that you were saying that DOE would conduct regular fish and wildlife surveys starting in March. I was wondering, why is the testing starting in March? And are you guys at all concerned about cherry blossom season being impacted by the situation?
Nobody has, I haven't seen anything at this point that would suggest to me that cherry blossom season would be negatively impacted. I just haven't. Richard, on the why when we started March. March is in a few days, by the way.
In terms of the wildlife assessments, yeah, that's kind of the season. So we would have normally started doing our normal surveys and everything in March anyway. We're just going to, again, increase frequency and increase the scope. The same way with the testing, water testing. We've increased the frequency, and we're going to continue to test for quite some time on a daily basis. So it's not like the advisory lifts and we stop testing. We intend to test for at least, for quite some time throughout the year. So we're just going to expand with the assistance of EPA. We now know we have the resources to do what we need to do, and working with our team, we'll continue to do the testing, and then we'll also incorporate the survey of the fish and the wildlife as we normally do, just on a more frequent basis.
Okay, we can take a few more in the back. I don't think you got a chance.
Yeah, Daniel Hamburg with DC News Now. Just in terms of, obviously, there's been a lot of talk about who's responsible for what. You said you're, in communication with the EPA right now, and DC Water has been working with the Park Service in terms of the C&O Canal. What is happening right now before the president responds to, your request for, especially reimbursement, of course, is the big thing. But what is happening right now in addition to testing that maybe folks are unaware of in terms of when the president says, ask us for help? You guys have been being helped already by the federal government?
Yes. I mean, in terms of, well, you will have to ask him what he means by that. I can't. But this is how we ask for help with a major disaster declaration. Yes.
Just because you mentioned weather at the end of the presentation, just for people listening, can you explain how weather would or would not impact cleanup and repairs, and then also how snow, rain impacts the river and its conditions as well?
That's a great question. Who wants to say, Dr.
I'm
Bennett?
happy to try. So I think one thing I want to make clear is that this is a dynamic process. It's a river. It's not the same water that it was 3 weeks ago. It's going to continue to flow. And what we saw was an event happen that we would expect the continued flow of the river to dilute and to continue to dilute, which is what we've seen happen. If we get rain that increases the flow of the river, you might see that improve in some ways, but it also causes stormwater runoff. So we normally see E. coli in pet waste and in other garbage that causes stormwater to be able to carry E. coli into the river. So you've seen, if you look at old data, even just the data, any data before the incident, this is a dynamic process where we see rises and falls. The vast majority of the time, the water is below the recreational level, but sometimes things happen. As we saw recent rainstorms, we might see this rainstorm. So weather impacts how much stormwater runoff is in the river, and stormwater runoff is another source of E. coli.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Mayor, just a little clarity from the DC side. I know Mr. Donahue clarified kind of how the federal agencies are helping out in this, but just to be clear, this was already happening prior to the request, because I know you pointed out, look, we've had EPA assisting. I just wanted to make the distinction of what happened before your request.
Well, let me turn to our agency heads to talk about that specifically. And when I say that, our agencies have counterparts in the federal government. They have some regulatory bodies that they report to. So that type of work is really automatic, and that includes DC Water. So let me turn to Clinton Richard to address that.
Yeah, I mean, we have regular communications with FEMA through our regional office. I know DOE has regular communications with the EPA, HHS. We all have these relationships, and in many ways, because we are where we are geographically, we have extremely close and strong relationships, and we get a lot of attention. So we do communicate with FEMA. Our ability to process the disaster declaration request always comes with support from our FEMA region. They've been very supportive and very communicative throughout this process.
Yes, and I would add is, we've been in contact with EPA once the incident happened. We've been in constant contact with them. As we knew we was going to have to ramp up sampling, we knew that we would need their assistance to do that because we do not have a lab. DC does not have a lab. They do. So that was one of the requests we made, and knowing that we were going to go down this path. So we've been in communication with EPA Region 3 from the beginning. They've been a great partner. They've also worked with MDE. And so part of that, what we're doing is just based on a relationship we have with EPA over the years.
Now that you've got crews in the broken portion of the pipe, how quickly do you think you could determine, or could you even determine a cause of the break? And then is any of this linked, is any of what happened here with this portion of the pipe linked to the rehab that was done just a little bit up the way last fall?
What I would say is at this point in time, I was out on the site yesterday and got some feedback from them yesterday when we finally got down there. Don't know how soon we'll be able to say what the cause of the break is, but as soon as we find out, we will be transparent in communicating that as to what the cause of the break is. And so that's what we're continuing to work at. I will tell you the men and women are working very, very hard out on this site. They're actually down, 20, 30 feet, and they're using shovels in digging some of this out, simply because it's very temperamental down there, the shoring, and we just want to make sure that everyone stays safe. But we do think that by mid March we will have completed and have everything back going into the PI and be able the Potomac Interceptor. And be able to shut down the flumes and those sort of things where we are taking water at this point in time.
Okay, last question in the back.
Just a question for DC Health in terms of obviously the messaging has been around coming in contact with the actual water. Mm-hmm. For people who are walking around or living nearby where that sewage is still flowing down the C&O Canal, is there a health risk from being next to that sewage for too long? Obviously, if you can smell it and taste it.
So it is really contact. So what we're talking about, the bacteria we're talking about it would be contact. They're not airborne like a virus would be. So there's a reason they have fencing along there to avoid that contact, and as long as people stay out of that area, they should be fine. So I'm not concerned about the odor or the area not in direct contact with sewage water.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody.